What's going on, YouTube? It's McLean with the Off-Road Rhino. Obviously not in the Jeep today, and I just gotta tell you, this is not one of our proudest moments. We are paying a little bit of stupid tax right now, and let me tell you why. So 2 days ago, on Saturday, we decided to drive out to the Bonneville Salt Flats, somewhere that we'd never been, and have a little bit of adventure. We planned on flying the drone around, taking some cool pictures, and when we got there, there was about 3 inches of water on the surface of the salt. It was very tempting to drive on. We weren't sure if driving on it was gonna be okay, so we just did a quick online Google search. And in hindsight, we should have been more thorough. Our first Google search took us to utah.gov, which is a pretty informative tourism site about Utah. And on the information page at utah.gov, it says that driving on the flats is just fine, but that you should take precaution if there's any water on the flats, because even though it looks very sturdy, there's a lot of mud underneath there that could actually break and you can end up getting stuck in the mud. That was basically the gist of the information that we got at utah.gov, and we stopped our search right there and we just went for it. We drove on the water. It's about 3 inches of water, and the pictures that we got of the Jeep out there are just amazing. Like, if nothing else, at least it was worth it for these pictures. I've never seen anything like this in my whole life, you guys. It was so cool. In hindsight, now that we're back from this trip, it would have been useful to check some other sources as well. The Utah BLM site states that driving on the salt flats while there's water is restricted. So there's conflicting sources of information. BLM says don't drive on the salt flats when there's water, but they're totally fine to drive on when there's no water. Utah.gov says it's best to drive on them when there's no water, but if there is water and you have the right kind of vehicle, just take precautions and you'll be okay. It's done now. We can't take it back. We got some great pictures while we were out there, but as a disclosure for everybody watching this video, the BLM site does say that it's restricted to drive on these while they're wet. So here's where the stupid tax comes in. First of all, salt water can be very bad for a vehicle. Well, that wasn't 100% what was in our heads at the time. We drove out into this 2-inch deep water, 3-inch deep water, and then we hauled out of there at a pretty high speed, and we ended up having salt water spray up and over the hood, up and around everything, and salt water got pretty much everywhere. We realized that we had to get the salt off as soon as possible, so we drove home from Wendover. The first gas station with a self-service car wash that we saw, we pulled over and we sprayed the whole Jeep down. We sprayed down the undercarriage, everywhere that I could possibly see, any salt, anywhere that I could get that pressure washer, we sprayed it down. After having just driven about 90 miles from Wendover and then washing the Jeep, not exactly sure what triggered this. We were driving back to pick up our dog from Gabby's parents, and we got into their neighborhood, and suddenly the dashboard lit up with a whole bunch of lights, error messages, check engine. We had a hot oil message on the odometer, basically complete freak out and meltdown. Well, Gabby was driving, so she pulled the Jeep over and we turned it off, and we just decided to let it sit for a minute. We were gonna try the old turn it off, turn it back on. We put the key back in the ignition, and I see all the lights come on, and it looks like we have full battery power, and yet when we go to crank it, we got nothing. We tried this a couple more times. A neighbor came over with a truck to just tow us the rest of the way. We were able to get the Jeep to turn over and start and run a little bit, but we were still getting those error messages. Our first hope was we would leave it in the garage overnight, let it dry out. We unhooked the negative battery cable to reset the computer systems, and our hope was that we'd come back in the morning, put the key in, and it would fire right up and we'd go home. Flash forward to the next morning, we come over, hook up the battery cable, go to turn the key, and same thing, no crank. It was at that point that I decided I don't know enough about this to try and troubleshoot this wire or this wire or this wire or anything like that. I'm just gonna call a tow truck and we'll have a shop take a look at it, diagnose it, and they'll get to it way faster than I could. So that brings us to today. I'm sitting in the car in front of Gabby's parents' house. We've called a tow truck who should be here in about an hour. We're gonna tow the Jeep to Agility Customs. They said they should be able to work on it, have it back in a day if it's not too big of an issue. Yeah, we're gonna see what happens from here, but lessons learned, salt water, watch out for it. I think we would have been fine if we just went slowly through the salt water and didn't get it up over the hood or anything. You know, you live and you learn. We'll see what the impact is on the Jeep here in a minute. Woo! All right, well, here's an update. As you can see, I'm now sitting in the Jeep. I just figured before the tow truck got here, why don't I just go try and crank it one more time, and it fired right up. So here we are. All of those freak out lights are gone. Got no hot oil message. Looking pretty good. Only thing is the check engine lights. We're still gonna take it over to Agility Customs to get it checked out. So the next stop is gonna be heading over to Agility Customs. We're gonna try to drive the Jeep over there rather than take it in the tow truck. At this point, we got the Jeep back from Agility Customs. They got back to us really quickly. They drove the Jeep around. They cleared the codes, which turned off the check engine light and didn't come back on. So our best guess as to what was wrong with the Jeep is some water got into one of the electrical components, and it took a little bit longer to dry than usual because of the cold weather outside. So all in all, we're really glad to have the Jeep back. Realized that we avoided some pretty big possible expenses in getting this one fixed, and feel pretty lucky to have made it out not having to pay anything. So now that this is all finished, I just wanted to wrap up with a couple thoughts. Number one, we realized that we're very lucky to have made it out of this with no expensive repairs. We could have gotten stuck in the salt flats. We could have shorted our whole electrical system, and that would require some expensive repairs. So number one, we made it out of this very lucky. Number two, we realized that our vehicle's now been splashed with salt water, and it's going to take a lot of love and care to make sure that it doesn't rust. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. We're really glad that before we went out here, Zach Nielsen and Nielsen's Detailing did a full undercarriage protection as part of his winter detail package. And part of that is to protect against the salt from the road. Now there's a lot more salt on the salt flats than there is out on the road, but still very glad that we got that done. Makes it a lot easier to clean that salt up. Number three, we understand that there's conflicting information online about what is restricted for the salt flats. But now that we know, we definitely don't encourage anybody to drive their vehicle out on the salt flats while they're wet. But we're very grateful to have made it out with no expensive repairs. Glad to have our Jeep back in the garage where it belongs. Thank you guys for watching. We want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. Thank you so much for supporting our channel and our growth. If you're new here, please do us a favor, click that subscribe button. We've always got new off-road related videos coming out. If you've been around, we'd appreciate it if you recommend our channel to any of your friends. And go ahead and drop a like on this video as well. We really appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you next time.